Have you been looking for a Taekwondo podcast with qualified people who know what they're talking about, who help you keep up with everything going on in the Taekwondo world? Well, you found it. This is the Taekwondo Podcast. Taekwondo news, competitions and other events, training and sports science, keeping the fans, coaches, and high-performance athletes up to date with the latest news and trends on Olympic Taekwondo. Let's do this. This is the Taekwondo Podcast. And now your hosts, Coach César Valentim and Peter Nessler.
Hello and welcome to the Taekwondo Podcast. We're a podcast based out of Austria in English language for everyone out there who likes Taekwondo. This episode, we're talking with Coach Diego Morine, strength and conditioning coach, Taekwondo technical trainer from Brazil. Welcome to our podcast. I'm Coach César Valentim. With me is Diego Morine. Hi, Diego. How are you again?
Hi, fine. Welcome. It's nice to be here again. It's an honor again to participate of a podcast that I listen every week.
Thank you very much. You're always giving positive feedbacks and suggestions for topics and episodes. Your second time on this podcast, we're what I call the unscripted podcast, because are those podcasts that you don't really need to go into the detailed background of the player, of the coach you're interviewing. We already know each other, and we've been talking in the podcast and between episodes. So this unscripted version is more like a friendly chat. So I'm happy that you are here with me and that there's people at home listening to us or in the car, wherever they're listening to our podcast. For those who didn't listen to the first episode, can you give us a short description of who you are? And also, because you recently took other projects and other initiatives, maybe present yourself a little bit.
Yes, sure. Actually, nowadays I'm a strength and conditioning, but nowadays I've been hired by the National Olympic Committee here in Brazil, so I'm start changing a little bit the area for the manager area here in the Olympic Committee. But all my background, all that I have studied in sports science and in strength and conditioning. Basically, I have been athlete since my 13 years, and then I entered at the university. I graduated in physical education, and since I entered the university at São Paulo University here in Brazil, I started to study the physiology of each modality. I knew that I want to work with training loads, periodization, physical training. Since I entered the university, I knew that I would like to be involved with the high level, with sports of high level. And when I graduate, I enter as strength and conditioning coach of Sports Club Pinheiros, which is the most Olympic club here in Brazil. I work with many modalities there, water polo, swimming, judo, which is a very strong modality here in Brazil. And then I became strength and conditioning coach of the Brazilian national team, where I took place there for 4 years, more or less. And now I'm the National Olympic Committee. And since 2014, I have my own company, Brasil Lutas, which is a company that we give consultancy. We prescribe training, physical trainings for athletes from all the world. Actually, nowadays, we have clients in all the regions of Brazil, in Panama, Peru, USA. So we have this company which we prescribe physical training for sports combat modalities.
So
that's a very resumed background.
Well, people that want to know a little bit more about your background can also listen to the first episode when you're a guest and we talk about strength and conditioning for Taekwondo and Para Taekwondo at that time. This time we're, as you mentioned, periodization. It's one of the things that definitely intrigues most of the trainers. I'm, as you know, big fan of different models, different blocks, different systems of approaching periodization. This year, periodization is going to be quite a challenge. How do you see yourself preparing your athletes for the season, and what are the challenges you're facing?
Well, here, when we see this calendar of this year, thinking athletes that are in the fight for qualifying for the Paris Olympic Games, for example. They want to be in the first 5 place of the Olympic ranking. I think they must do their 40 points of opens, the 20 points the President Cup. You have the World Championship and 4 Grand Prix. Since one of the Grand Prix is in the same week as the World Championship, I don't know why this like the World Championship is a championship that in general the guy who will go to the final will do like 6 fights. I think you go to a final in the World Championship and then you have a Grand Prix in the next week. What's the chance of you have an injury in this first championship? So this is very challenging to how do you distribute, how you organize the loads, or especially when you are used to do blocks, content distribution of loads, training blocks. So it's very hard, very difficult to managing this calendar because you have like championship during almost all the year. So you must think in the recovery of the athletes after each travel, because it's not just the competition. The athlete will take the plane, will travel for another country, so it take a while for him to adapt to that place, and then he will come back. So you have this recovery not just from the competition, but from the travel itself, and you must consider and how do you organize this load and distribute this physical content. That's very challenging. I think this is one of the most challenging calendar that I have seen since I saw. Of course, we always have many competitions, but this year I think it's very tough to organize. And I think we are entering a logic of organization very similar with collective sports, like for example, with team sports that you have like off season and then you on season. So you must have a pre-season to increase like the intensity, to do intensification of the loads, to prepare like the strength and the muscles of the athlete for them to can handle with all the season and the loads that he will be imposed during all the year, all the season. And then during the season, like we'll try to keep and maintain like the main capacities, especially the power, which is I think the most important capacity for us in Taekwondo, in the fights in general. And that's one of the possibilities. I have some more possibilities here, but I think we are entering in a logic that's more similar to collective sports than in general what we had before, that we could do some blocks like ATR or some logics of periodization that were feasible for us. And I personally always liked some block strategies, but nowadays it's a little more difficult to organize this kind of periodization with this calendar. I don't know what you think.
Well, there's different realities, of course, between Europe, where I'm located, and the American region. You guys have to travel way more, and you have to take the plane. You guys start the calendar probably Costa Rica or Canada Open, and then you fly to Las Vegas for the US Open. Then you have to go to Middle Central America, South America for competitions, and it takes a lot of time that you are on a plane, you are traveling, you are jet lagged. That doesn't happen so much in Europe. Time difference maximum 1 hour between Central Europe, and if you had to go to West Europe or Eastern Europe, there's not a big difference. The distance covered by the athletes is also not that much. Some of them are even feasible by car. So the competitions, I decided this year not to go to competitions too far away. Don't travel to other continents on the first part of the season. We have, as everyone, to qualify for the Worlds. We'll have, in the case of Europe, right after the Worlds, the European Games, but there's also the Grand Prix series. There's also events that are quite demanding and very short distance from each other in terms of time. So undulating periodization is definitely one of the solutions, because blocking or any kind of linear periodization, it's right now impossible. You can do that maybe with the beginners, you can do that with the cadets, you can do that with some of the juniors, considering that there's continental cadets and junior championships this year. But it's, especially with the beginners, you can do a ATR approach or a linear periodization kind of planning, but you cannot do that with the high performance, with the seniors that are competing in the international level, with aiming to World Championships qualifications and good results at the World Championships or at the Continental Games. The struggle is there. The struggle is real. It's not only physical demanding for the players, for us to keep their metrics and their key points of when we do their preparation always in a high level, to have them peak more than once in a few short time span. But there's also the cost implied with being away from the family, mental training, the financial burden of all these competitions, and nutritional challenges, because they have to make weight week after week in some times of the year. So altogether, the fact that in my case, if the players are cutting weight, I also have to cut on the strength and conditioning, on the technical training. You're tapering entire year. You're not allowed to do much more outside of the preseason.
I fully agree. And like this challenging of the weight, this is very tough, especially, for example, for that athletes that fights in the intermediate categories. And in some events, they must to go down to the Olympic category. So imagine that the guy, I don't know, fighting the 63, but in the Olympic category, fighting 58, for example, is challenged to compete so much. And then you have sometimes to cut very much weight. So this is a real challenge for organizing. And I agree with non-linear periodization, undulating loads. And like you need to use different capacities at the same times, and not in a block mentality that you usually work first, focus first on strength, and then the metabolic loads, and then power, for example. And I think nowadays is most important than ever, like the monitoring tools and the evaluations. With the non-linear periodization, it's important for us nowadays to evaluate more our athletes. Besides, for example, the normal tools of monitoring, like to see the recovery of the athletes, what's the internal loads of each training session. Like, it's important to evaluate, especially the power of the athletes. How can we keep like the power during all the competitions during the year? How the athlete is recovering after the competitions, like doing more evaluations and understanding how he's responding to this amount of competitions. It's important, because with these evaluations, if you know that the athlete is losing power or is losing, I don't know, the aerobic capacity, then you can increase or decrease the volume of that capacity in your training plan. So I think doing more evaluations and understanding how the athlete is responding during the season, it's a good strategy to like adjust your training and try to keep like your performance during the year. I don't know, I don't see much more solutions with this crazy calendar that we have. Like we must undulate the loads and have more tools and use more this data to adjust our training. Always like having some data to see how the athlete is responding, and then adjust our planning to this situation and to this need, like evaluate the athlete, see the data, and see what's his need, what he's needing more based on the evaluations. I don't know what you think. I know that we have the strength platforms that you have partnership, and I know that you like using new technologies and using tools to monitor, and I think that's very important nowadays. I would like to know what do you think about it too.
Well, that's a good question right there, because that's also where the secret lies. And I would love to listen to some of your golden nuggets, because that's actually important. When we do the athlete monitoring, and we all have, at least at the high performance, we have athlete monitoring systems that allow us to monitor the internal and external loads of the player. We have simple things like a simple wellness questionnaire or training report with repetitions in reserve, rate of perceived exertion. Those are allow you to monitor the training, and you can have with some other tools. You can either use force plates from Walking Dynamics like me and do some counter movement jumps and check if their neuromuscular system is under fatigue. And that, of course, can give you some parameters on the current status of the player. But as you mentioned, to keep evaluating the players throughout the active season to see if they are losing power capacities, it's much more complicated than just doing fatigue test. And to keep determining aerobic capacities, determining the power outputs, that's the question. How do you do it without interfering in the training? Because testing itself should be easy, should not interfere with the player, should not interfere with the training, and should be short, concise. And tests are important for us. The players understand that the tests are important for us to plan their training. But what kind of tests can we actually use to monitor power and aerobic capacity without interfering with the training?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, the power, I think it's a little easier in general, like a jump test or something like this. It's not a test that in general will causing any kind of fatigue for the athlete. But for the aerobic capacity, this is a little harder because, of course, it's usually we use a progressive test. You have like a general and specific test. Nowadays, you have like a aerobic test for taekwondo. We have progressive tests with Bandal Chagui, for example, that you can like estimate not just the VO2, but the anaerobic threshold. And like this test can give you, for example, which kind of frequency of kicking the athletes should train for increase like the threshold. But like the problem, it's a progressive test. It's a maximum test. So of course, this is a test that the athlete will have fatigue. But if you take, for example, that the test is a training. So imagine that this aerobic test is an aerobic training. So which day would you put like in that week an aerobic training so that would have a high load? I would use this logic to organize this aerobic test. For the power, it's a little I think it's more simple, because the jump test will not cause any kind of fatigue. We have other kind of tests that are specific tests for velocity tests, like ATF's KT frequency speed kicking test, and the frequency speed kicking test mode too, that are two nice tests that I usually do with my athletes, that are 10 seconds kicking. And the mode, it's like 5 volts of 10 seconds kicking with 10 seconds of interval. These are two nice indicators, because specific velocity test for taekwondo, and the other one we have like a repeated sprint with kicks. So we have a fatigue index that's quite important for us for the fights. These tests, of course, we will not do always, but these tests in general, especially the second one, cause some fatigue for the athlete. So it's a little harder to organize which day will be better, because the athlete will have some kind of fatigue. That's not there's no rule, right? But I would organize I see the test as a training too. So imagine which day of the week would be nice to put repeated sprint for that week. I think like more or else in this logic to organize this training and don't impact too much the training. I don't know what do you think about this, and which kind of logic do you use to organize these evaluations?
It's actually funny. We didn't. This is again an unscripted podcast, so, but it's you got right to the point where I usually go. And if I come from a competition, the first training, if possible, even in the competition location, it's a regeneration training. And then the first trainings when I come home is of course aerobic capacity training. And myself, the frequency of speed kicking test and the RST variations of those tests are what I use as a training. If I want to do RST training, I'll just use the test to monitor them, especially the aerobic degenerative index of the player. It's a training for them, and of course you have to plan accordingly that the week has to be counting on the recovery for that training session, like you would do in any kind of repeated sprint training. And that's how I enter the tests. I don't do it so often, otherwise it's very boring for the players to do always the same every week. But the repeated sprint kicking, so the frequency of speed kicking test can be used as a training, and that's how I do it in my periodization. I usually have a block where it's actually a training, but it's for the players, and for me it's the test. The power outputs again. I have force plates that are the best out there, Hawken Dynamics. So that takes me 1 minute to test 3 athletes with simple counter movement jumps, hands-free, fixed hands. We can do a whole other kind of test with the plates, but that one is the easy one. There's also an equipment out there. They don't sponsor the podcast, but I'm a big fan of the equipment. Is the Output Sports. There were others. There was Push Strength, and Push is discontinued. It was bought by Whoop Band, and if you have it, you can still use it until September this year, and then you cannot use it anymore. And to be fair, in the end, it was not connecting so well with the app. The feedback wasn't immediate. So the advantage of using that VBT device is a velocity-based training equipment to measure output, power output on your players, because it's a wearable that is without cables, connects to every cell phone or tablet. With Output Sports, and I have a couple of those accelerometers, you can also measure the counter movement jumps. You can measure unilateral movements. You can measure other linear, non-linear angular velocities, all this kind of stuff, and it fits in your pocket. There is nowhere in the world I go that I don't take my Output Sports accelerometer with me in the pocket. It's always there. I always have one in my backpack. It's always traveling with me, and if I notice that there is some fatigue, I test the players. It can be used, of course, as a training tool, but definitely as a monitoring tool is something you can always have literally in your toolbox.
I really enjoy these new wearables with accelerometer. I had a Push for training, but it broke because I attached in weightlifting bar, and when I dropped it on the floor, it broke. But when I bought it and I started to do the power training with these accelerometers, I usually give feedback for the athlete. So the nice thing of these accelerometers is like you can give a feedback in real time. So for example, we're doing 1.2, 1.3. Oh, you drop it 0.9. So the athlete can have a real feedback of his velocity during the exercise. And for power, this is essential. Sometimes the athlete is doing a power training. He's thinking he's doing his best, But when he has this feedback, this real feedback, like he always push more, he can do with more power. He have this real feedback. I think this is essential. I start to make jokes here in my gym that I said for the people, man, this kind of equipment, these accelerometers, is like the polar of who train power, because people who run, who do these aerobic activities, everyone has a polar, a frequencyometer, and like these accelerometers will be the equipment that will be mandatory for anyone who wants to develop the power. And the nice thing is like you can monitor like the power of your athlete, because you in general in these apps you put the weight that he's doing and what's the velocity of each repetition, and you can compare with the other training. So it's much easier to understand if the athlete is decreasing, having more fatigue. Even during the training, that session, you can see clearly if he's decreasing or not the fatigue. So you can have much more quality during the power training. And like as I said, power for me is one of the main goals in a strength and conditioning program for Taekwondo.
One of the good things with the wearables and the good thing with output is that you can do 3-mode systems, and then you can attach them to the kick as well, or to the punches, or to the displacements you are doing. And power, the load variable. So basically, how much load they have to carry or to move, it's regulated by us, but the speed is very dependent on the player. And the most important thing in speed, of course, I'm talking about not the muscle fibers, it's the intention. The player's intention to move as fast as possible is what determines if the speed training is going to be effective or not in any kind of speed training, if it's strength and conditioning or even technical training. And when it comes to the wearables that give you real-time feedback, allows the players to actually recruit that intention, because they see it. There's a visual and sometimes even a audible feedback on the movement you're doing, and they see the bars. Okay, this repetition was not fast enough, I'll go there. And I use a lot planning with fatigue, with some movements or with some players. It has to be at the 20% velocity cutoff. I say you do as many reps as possible, as fast as possible, until your first repetition is slow, and then you will make a break. And for some movements, it has to be 20%, or for some players, it has to be 20%. But for some movements, 10% velocity drop is enough for me to cut the system and avoid going into muscular and neuromuscular fatigue, and keep the athletes developing speed and speed strength at the best conditions possible. And you can only do that with these wearables, because the eye is or the internal feedback is not accurate.
Yes.
Sometimes we have the feeling, yes, this was a good rep, but then we look at the velocity, or we look at the high-speed cameras, or you look at the wearables and trackables that you are using, and you see, no, it was not actually the fastest. The other one was the fastest. It's just the movement. It's a bias. Visual observation is not enough when we're talking about milliseconds, and we're talking about very short motions and with 50 centimeters weight displacement. So it has to be very very accurate to train in the maximum conditions. Don't waste time. And that's also the good thing about wearables and all these apps and those monitoring tools and also training programming tools. We don't waste time. The players know exactly what they're going for. They have to do each exercise as it's prescribed in the plan, and it makes training that fun part of the day, not that boring part of the day. Like you go for training, you know what you're going to do, and you know it's going to take 1 hour 40 minutes, and you're going to give it all. Intention is there, motivation is there, the good mood of the athlete and or the team, if they have a group workout, is there, and technology is helping. And people say, oh, you have all these toys. Yes, I have a big toolbox, and but I don't use them all at once, and I don't use them all for all the things they can do. I use them for what I think they're important for my my training. And these days, with the load, and we were talking back again about the periodization, when we have so little time to prepare the athletes, every minute counts.
I fully agree with you. And if you take, for example, nowadays in the society, like technology is changing the job of everyone. Everyone's job is changing with new technologies, new way of doing the same things. And why we think sports it doesn't being affected by the technology, especially in taekwondo, that all the style had changed with the technologies of PSS, for example. So it's important for the coach nowadays, at least for those one who wants to keep in the high level, to try to be more open to these new technologies, because nowadays technologies that, for example, 10 years ago, you wouldn't expect to be feasible for you to acquire in your private gym, for example, nowadays are a real possibility. So, for example, an accelerometer, when I was in the university, for example, I would never think that this would be a possibility to monitoring the velocity of each repetition on the strength training of an athlete. That was unimaginable. And nowadays, it's something feasible, And of course, the coach must adapt himself for organizing the training, how he will use this, for who he will use this. So it's always challenge, because you are not doing the same thing, You must adapt and always rethinking your training. But that's the good part. So I think this is something for those for those who wants to keep in the high level, being more open to the new technologies and understand how it can help our organization and our training be more efficient, especially with these new calendars and the amount of competition and the time that we have to prepare our athlete. I think this is very important. You were very precise when you said that you gain time, like for the few time that you have to prepare between one competition and another, like using technology in your favor. It's essential, because you don't have so much time with the athletes on your gym. The athlete will travel like in a few weeks. The athlete must to hit his weight. So use this kind of technology will help a lot to like increase the power. And I think some VBT strategies can be very interesting during the season, like to keep the power of the athlete and like to hit some goals in the strength and conditioning.
We have to, when we look at 10 years ago, velocity based training, and all these accelerometers were linear. They were cabled, attached to cables, mostly designed for barbells. You have 1280, another system that you use for running, where they have the cables behind them and that can do resistance or even negative resistance to work on speed when you're on running. But there are still huge cables and huge machines that you have to have on a track. In Taekwondo, you don't need that anymore. And if you don't want to get a special VBT training device, and you don't want to go for output sports or push, you cannot go anymore, and you don't want to go with that, there's other solutions that are right there. Like my players, every day, the most important part of the monitoring tool for me is my first beat sensor. My first beat sports sensor that the players use allows them to measure heart rate variability and see their recovery status. It monitors loads during training, so I have a complex and full spectrum of the of heart rate variability, and also the movement loads and effort during the training from their internal loads, and also from their heart rate variability I get their recovery. It's very, very important to see how the players are recovered before you push the training sessions. And it's I asked them to do the tests. The quick recovery test is a 3-minute test where they measure heart rate variability when they wake up. Allows me to decide before I even leave my apartment and go to my studio, if the training is going to be as planned or I have to adapt the plan, because the tools are there and it's remote. I can see how recovered they are, and I can adapt the training for that. And in terms of power, again, you can get 2-in-1. You can get the 2020 Armor. The 2020 Armor is a device that has the possibility for you to train kicking and punching, but it measures power as well. I have a 2020 armor in a bob, body opponent bag, laying in a corner, standing in a corner of my gym. And they turn it on and they can measure the reaction speeds. They can measure the power outputs of their kicks and very specific tests. We're using equipment that you would not see in a strength and conditioning because they are not strength and conditioning equipments. They're taekwondo equipments made for a different kind of taekwondo, but allow you to have a better, more accurate results on power outputs for taekwondo specific techniques. So you don't even have to buy the full set. Just buy one, leave it there on the corner. Test it, and you can measure power and speed, reaction speed outputs with an easy device. It is not so expensive, and it makes more sense maybe for a taekwondo school to invest on. And again, heart rate variability. There are solutions. There's premium pro team solutions like mine, but there's also single individual solutions from First Beat and from other brands that will allow you to measure the heart rate variability, and that's the most useful tool to measure recovery of the players.
This podcast is supported by Hawken Dynamics. Hawken Dynamics believes that technology is most useful when it stays out of your way. That's why Hawken developed the world's first wireless force plate system with extreme usability. It is the quickest, easiest to use, and most robust solution on the market. It is trusted by all sports organizations, large and small, as well as tactical, military, and rehabilitation environments around the globe. It's force testing in the palm of your hand. Here at Vin Taekwondo Center, we use Hawken Dynamics to test and monitor our team. The cloud-based platform allows us to access data and publish a variety of reports on the go. My favorites are trend reports and, of course, weight reports, where I can monitor different metrics to view progress and identify performance indicators, or to compare weights to a baseline data range. I use it on a daily basis to identify readiness. A simple jumping test takes me less than a minute to assess the entire team. Having my own Hawken Dynamics force plates allows me to test reactive strengths, maximum strengths, rate of force development, asymmetry, and so much more. The real-time feedback on the app is useful not only for testing, but as a training tool, making it more accurate and at the same time more engaging for the athletes. If you are interested in learning more about Hawken Dynamics or getting your own, the team can be reached at info@hawkendynamics.com or on Instagram or Twitter @HawkenDynamics.
This podcast is sponsored by First Beat Sports. First Beat Sports combines the most comprehensive analytics in team sports with a customizable interface to support real-time monitoring, recovery monitoring, performance management, and much more. The result? Data-driven decisions that support your athletes and team training, recovery, and performance goals. First Beat Sports is trusted by professionals. Over 23,000 athletes representing over 1,000 teams around the world rely on the solution to train and plan with confidence on a team and individual level using HRV-based insights. For more information, please visit our website, firstbeat.com/sports.
You're listening to the Taekwondo Podcast. Now back to your hosts, Coach César Valentim and Peter Nessler.
I agree. I have a story about heart rate variability. When I was training Deborah, for those who don't know, was my athlete. Deborah Menezes was world champion in the para taekwondo, and I was her coach in that time. And we were training. Actually, was before she wasn't world champion yet. We were training for the world championship, and I usually to monitor her heart rate variability every morning. When she woke up, she would measure and send to me. And like in that day, that there was one day that her heart rate variability was indicating that she was very fatigued, and I was planning 2 taekwondo sessions for that day. The first one, a smaller one, just for technical with pedals, and the second one for more tacticals. We were training for some specific situations, so that was the planning for that day. I keep the first session, and the second session I changed. I said, I will not do any kind of tactical stuff that has too much variability on the environment. We will do another training of techniques, but with some other techniques. It will not be a long training. So I did this adjustment because she had many technical errors that we should adjust. So I took this bad decision of keeping these two taekwondo trainings. And in this second training of taekwondo, she was kicking the pedal. When she landed his foot in the floor, she twisted her ankle. And man, it was very bad. And it was like 2 months for the world championship. It was not so close, but like 2 months before you twist your ankle, and like she broke 2 ligaments. And so luckily we could recover, and she won the world championship. But that was a bad decision. Actually, I should cut this second taekwondo training. But I adjust. I in my mind, I saw she was with more fatigue. I adjusted the training. I didn't do the technical training, but it was a wrong decision. I should cut the second taekwondo training, and that was a hard price to pay for this error. But it's just for elucidate how important it is to monitoring the heart rate variability and monitoring the fatigue of the athlete, and how this data can affect our decision of keeping what we were planning, or we should make some adjustment on it. And of course, there's no rule. For example, this story that I told, it was not a happy story, and it was a mistake that I committed. Unfortunately, as coaches, we make mistakes, and but I think these stories make clear how important it is to monitoring this kind of variables in our athletes.
That's the thing. Like, we have, most of us, you, I, and most of our listeners, we have just half a dozen athletes at work, and that work with us, and that have nobody to replace them in case of an injury. So injury risk needs to be very well monitored. When we have loads and we are overtraining them, when we are undertraining them, those both increase to risks, because an undertrained athlete, with a little strength in some movements, will have injury risk. An athlete that has overtrained is, of course, also liable to have more risks, and we have to monitor them. And big teams, and we talk about the big powerhouses in taekwondo, pretty sure they will use it. We know GB team uses it. We know that Germany uses it. Brazil, it's I'm not so sure, because you guys don't have a national team training center. But
yes,
if you're not developing a system in your athletic program that monitors the players, you are not going to keep your players in the maximum output that they should be able to, because the injuries will be there, the training will not be maximized. And again, an injured player includes, again, the mental issues, includes, again, the entire nutrition issues, again, in their lifestyle. So injured player is an injury is the worst thing that can happen to a player. They are left out from the training plan. They are left out from the team trainings. They feel a little bit insecure, unmotivated. And of course, if you are injured, you're not allowed to train. You will not be in the peak performance when you should be. And monitoring the players is a solution for that.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, and especially with this crazy calendar that we have this year, with a world championship in the same week as a Grand Prix. Like, monitoring the recovery of the athletes will be fundamental.
Besides periodization, let's talk a little bit about other things. What have you been doing recently?
Well, nowadays, as I said, I changed a little bit. I'm working as a manager in the National Olympic Committee, but I have my own company, which is Brazil Lutas. In Brazil Lutas, we have the prescription training. We give physical training for combat sports athletes. So we have athletes from Muay Thai, from boxing, from Taekwondo. We have different modalities that we attend nowadays. And in the last year, we started another service in Brazil Lutas, which is performance analysis. So we have different kind of service for performance analysis. Like the most basically, we monitor all the results of the athletes. This is important. For example, some athletes here in Brazil, and I think in many parts of the world too, if you taking the end of the year and ask for him, what's the percentage of victory and defeat that you have this year, he can't tell you. If you said, oh, what's the average of points that you usually do in a fight, or what's the average of points that you usually receive in a fight, he can't answer you. Like some basic statistics is just like monitoring your results. Many athletes don't have this. And for example, if you take a team, what's the percent of victory of your team? If you want to present a report to a sponsor, for example, or if you want to search for a sponsor, do you have like a presentation? Do you have like statistics of the team? This kind of stuff is like some basic stuff for any team sports, but for Taekwondo, in general, the athletes and the gyms doesn't have any kind of control. We have like more specific service on the performance analysis, where we do scout, the scout of the athletes. So we have the statistics of which pace, which kind of technique you are scoring or receiving the score, in which part of the body that you are receiving or you are scoring. We have like the service that some coaches, I want the fights of that athlete. We are start to armazenate some all the international fights last year. We start to that at least that are transmitted in YouTube. We are downloading, so we are creating a database of videos of fightings to give for the coaches, the coaches that we are our clients. They say, I want a fight of this athlete. So we see in our database which athlete this athlete, and then we send these fights for him. So we are starting this new kind of service that, at least in the fights, of course, as I said, in team sports they have like much more advanced stuff, but for the combat sports, this some kind of new. Many teams they don't usually have this kind of service and this kind of statistics, and they don't sometimes they don't know how to use these informations. And we are now in Brazil Lutas, we have like these two kinds of service for physical training, for the performance analysis, and we have like some course that we developed too, like course for physical training, periodization, and we have like tools for periodization. So we created some dashboards for the coaches to be easier for them. Many coaches want to study periodization, but sometimes they don't know how to use Excel, how to develop a spreadsheet. So we develop a tool and we sell this too. So this is some of the service that we developed last year in Brazil Lutas, and this year we have like we want to develop some bigger course, like a real formation of coaches, develop of coaches for physical training. So we are. I'm very excited for this year, for what we did in the last year and what we want to do this year. That's like a resume of what we are doing in Brazil Lutas with strength and conditioning and taekwondo, and actually nowadays other sports, combat sports too.
That's you're a very big entrepreneur trying to develop the sport, and going outside of Brazil is also not very normal. People taekwondo in Brazil is usually not exported too much, and you have quite a client base outside. And of course, it helps to have all this know-how of the sport. And as you mentioned, scouting. If you don't have the statistics of your players, and if you don't do video analysis of your opponents and your own players, it's well, the opponents is important, but even your players, how can you train them if you don't know what's their active and median active time or median active rest times, and which kind of game do they play? How can you then adapt the aerobic and anaerobic capabilities of the player? And of course, for presentation, for reporting and sponsoring, you need to have all the statistics. And it's, I'm not so aware of what other clubs are doing, because the reality in Austria is that most clubs are not doing high performance taekwondo, so they don't need these tools. But around the world, I'm pretty sure that some people are doing it. The tools out there are probably not affordable for everyone, but there are solutions that are affordable. The monitoring tools and the video analysis tools, they are monitored, they are affordable. Maybe there's no time or there's no one to manage those tools, and the fact that you are offering them, it's very interesting. Do you do it with individual players, or do you also do it with the national federations?
No, we do with individual players and some teams that are our clients nowadays, but not for the federations, just for the private clubs and some athletes.
Okay. Now,
at least until now, we are not offering anything for any federation.
Okay. Well, that's. I'm pretty sure someone will listen to this and reach out to you. Do you have anything that you are doing that no one else is doing? There's something special in your toolbox that no one else is doing?
Well, it's difficult to say no one else is doing. Like, the world is very big. Maybe I'm pretty sure someone is developing something similar. But like, my focus nowadays, this year, is on some education programs. Like, I'm very motivated to training other coaches and to develop. I believe in the education, like education give everything that I had. And here in Brazil, at least, we have a lot of problems with the education of the coach. Education in the sense of the technical part of the physical education, of training. And in the last year, I developed like what is my philosophy of work, what I believe that are the abilities and the capacities that a strength and conditioning coach must have to develop a nice program of strength and conditioning. And then I put in some pillars, some principles of what are the principles, and I call the 3 Pro. Like, we have 3 pillars, and then I'm developing a huge course, like more or less 40 hours of course, that is explaining all this philosophy of work that goes through the physiology of the main modalities until the periodization, monitoring tools. Like, it's a very complete course that I'm developing, that we will launch this year, this course. As I said, I don't know if other people are doing it, but I think this is what I'm focused more nowadays. And as this is an education area, and as a physical coach, especially, I think my main differential is the point between the theoretical and the practical. In general, as I said, it's difficult to say, oh, nobody does this, but at least I think this is some strength of mine. I know the world is big and there are many good professionals out there, but I think you have a theoretical fundament that you can talk with the practical aspects and understand what is really important for the athlete that's there, and can have a nice dialogue with the coach This, I think, is differentiation a little bit me, because I have many friends that are strength and conditioning, and they have a lot of difficulty to deal sometimes with the coach that doesn't have the same theoretical background as him, and then they have difficulty to work with them. And in general, I can deal very well with the coach, and I have a very nice dialogue with the athletes. I can lead them, I can motivate them. So I think this point, this bridge between the theoretical and practical stuff, read academic paper, but know how to talk with the athlete. I think these are some abilities that are fundamentals for a strength and conditioning coach, for a coach in general. And I think this is something that I'm better in this and differentiate me a little bit.
Well, there's
I don't know if I answered the question.
Yes, yes, you definitely did. And your knowledge is so vast that I'm pretty sure I'm going to invite you a few more times for these unscripted podcasts. There's so much to talk about there, especially on the preparation of technical skills that I would like to pick your brain on. And I think I will invite you to be often in the podcast, and we can do some more technical sessions.
Well, for me, it will be an honor to participate again of the podcast. As I said in the beginning, I'm a listener, and it's real. I always send message for you with feedbacks about the podcast. I really enjoy podcast because I'm a listener of many podcasts. And when I said, man, a podcast of taekwondo, of sportive taekwondo, man, I must listen this podcast. And I listen all the week, and participate for me is an honor because you are a coach that I admire. I admire your job. You have a lot of knowledge beside taekwondo. In taekwondo, at least in Brazil, few coaches have this theoretical knowledge, understand about training and taekwondo. This is a bridge that is a little rare, at least in Brazil. I can't talk about other countries, but you are someone that I admire, and participate of the podcast is an honor. You can invite me. I will participate definitely whenever you want.
Thank you very much, Diego. It was a pleasure being here with you again, and with everyone who is listening. This was the Taekwondo Podcast. If you haven't already, listen to our other episodes that are available wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are releasing new episodes every Tuesday. Stay tuned, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a positive review, and share it with your friends. See you next time.
You've been listening to the Taekwondo Podcast, keeping the fans, coaches, and high-performance athletes up to date with the latest news and trends on Olympic Taekwondo. Your host, Coach César Valentim, has almost 20 years of experience with high-performance Taekwondo and has worked all around the world as a Taekwondo trainer. Peter Nessler has been teaching Taekwondo for more than 20 years, and he's currently one of the top referees in Europe. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram at Taekwondo Podcast, on Facebook at Taekwondo Cast, and the website taekwondopodcast.com. See you next time.